Welcome to the session on viral cultivation methods. I am Dr. Dhanya K.C. from the Department of Microbiology, St. Mary's College, Thrissur. In this session, we are going to learn about various viral cultivation methods. As we all know, viruses are obligate intracellular parasites and they could be grown only inside a living cell. So for their cultivation also, we need suitable host, a living host. So what is the purpose for virus cultivation? What are the applications of virus cultivation? Virus cultivation is performed to get sufficient amount of virus particles, and this is needed for studying virus-host interactions, diseases caused by viruses, and also for studying the effectiveness of antiviral drugs to formulate more efficient treatment methodologies. Viruses are used as gene vectors in gene therapy. For that purpose, we need virus to be cultivated. There are certain viral pesticides. For the production of viral pesticides also, we need to cultivate viruses. And there are also virus vaccines. For vaccine production, we need to cultivate viruses. And then by making them less pathogenic or making them inactivated, we will use as vaccines. So virus cultivation is essential for all these applications. We can see certain viruses, images of certain viruses. There are animal viruses, plant viruses, and bacterial viruses. As we said before, viruses are host dependent. They are highly host specific. Therefore, for the cultivation of each virus, we need to cultivate, to grow them in their specific host. So for the cultivation of bacterial viruses or bacteriophages, we need bacterial culture. For the cultivation of plant viruses, we should use plant tissue culture or whole plants as the host. For the cultivation of animal viruses, there are different modes. We can use either embryonated eggs, or we can use animal tissue culture, or we can use laboratory animals. Coming to the cultivation of bacterial viruses are viruses which have their specific host, a bacteria. So they can be cultivated using a bacteria as the host. They can be cultivated either in the broth culture of bacteria or in an agar culture of bacteria. If you are cultivating bacteriophages in a broth culture, the bacteriophage will be added to the broth culture of bacteria. The bacteriophage will infect the bacteria. They will multiply, resulting in the destruction of host cells if the bacteriophage is a lytic one. During this replication, there will be viral multiplication, and simultaneously the bacterial cells will be destroyed. Therefore, the broth culture, the turbidity of the broth culture will clear rapidly. If you are cultivating bacteriophages in an agar culture, then the bacteriophage, bacteria and nutrient media are mixed, placed in a sterile petri dish and incubated. Here, the nutrient media we are providing for the growth of bacteria. The bacteria will grow and it will be infected by the bacteriophage. The bacteriophage will replicate, resulting in the bacterial lysis. So we can see plaques or clear zones in the bacterial lawn culture. Each plaque is developing from a single viral particle, and therefore the number of plaques could be quantitated as the number of phages. It is represented as phage forming unit or PFU. In the image you can see phage plaques produced by coliphages, T coliphages. We can see the coliphage T1, T2, T3 and T4. These are the bacteriophages which infect E. coli. So they form different types of plaques on the bacterial lawn culture. Each phage produces a plaque of different morphology. Now Coming to the cultivation of plant viruses. For the cultivation of plant viruses, the host is a plant. So we can use either a whole plant or we can use plant parts such as leaves. Another method of cultivating plant viruses is by using plant tissue cultures. We can use either tissue cultures of cells, plant cells, or plant protoplast culture. If we are using whole plants or plant parts for cultivation of plant virus, for the inoculation, the virus is to be rubbed with the plant leaves. It should be rubbed along with an abrasive such as carborundum so that the plant cell wall breaks, which enables the virus to reach the plasma membrane and then into the interior of the cell to start its infection cycle. The viral infection will result in a localized necrotic lesion either in the stems or in the leaves due to the rapid death of the plant cells due to viral multiplication. The infected plant also show changes in the pigmentation or changes in the shape of the leaves. Some other plant viruses could be inoculated only if a diseased part of the plant is grafted onto a healthy plant. If we are using plant tissue culture for the cultivation of virus, we can inoculate the virus into the plant tissue culture. We may use either a suspension culture or callus culture, and we can incubate for the multiplication of virus to obtain the virus population. This image shows a Nicotiana plant leaf infected with tobacco mosaic virus. We can see the pigmentation patterns in the leaf that is due to the viral growth. Coming to the cultivation of animal viruses. For the cultivation of animal viruses, we may use either live animals or embryonated eggs or animal tissue culture or animal cell culture. Whatever may be the system we are using, either the animal or eggs or cell culture, it should be free from bacteriological contamination. It should be achieved either by using specific pathogen-free animals or SPF animals, or if we are using cell culture, the media should be treated with antibiotics or the media should be sterilized by passing through a membrane filter so that the virus will grow without any contamination. During the virus replication, during the viral growth, the living cells, the infected living cells will get destroyed, and this will result in disease lesions or other abnormalities in the tissues, and these changes can be used to evaluate whether the virus is growing or not. So, coming to the first mode of cultivation of animal viruses, that is inoculation into animals. This is the most commonly employed method of viral cultivation. It was first done by Reed and his colleagues in 1900s. They used human volunteers as the media, as a host to cultivate viruses. They cultivated yellow fever virus in human volunteers. Later, by 1909, Hansteiner and Popper used monkeys for the cultivation of virus. They used monkeys for the isolation of poliovirus. Currently, mice are the most widely used laboratory animals. Mice are susceptible to different types of viruses, especially infant mice is susceptible to Coxsackie and arboviruses. A mice could be inoculated through several routes. We know, apart from host specificity, many viruses also have tissue specificities. So if a virus is having a neurospecificity, if it is able to grow in a neural tissue, it could be inoculated intracerebrally, directly into the brain. There are subcutaneous inoculation modes, intraperitoneal, that means into the abdominal cavity, and respiratory viruses could be inoculated intranasally through the nasal canal. There are other laboratory animals also being used for the cultivation of virus. They are guinea pigs, rabbits, ferrets, birds like chicken, etc. Whatever animal that we are going to use for the cultivation of virus, it should be germ free. It should be specific pathogen free. The experimentally inoculated animals should be examined for the growth of virus. The growth of virus in the animal will result in a variety of symptoms. We may observe the animals for clinical signs of disease such as respiratory distress, central nervous system involvement, and there may be visible lesions on skin and membranes. All these clinical signs depend upon the type of virus. Each type of virus show different types of clinical symptoms. There may be abnormal behavior from the animal, and we can collect blood samples from the inoculated animal to test for antibodies which may be directed against the viral antigen. And in the case of some viruses, the animal will be dead, and the death of the animals is also an indication that the virus is growing. And we may use biopsy material or tissue specimens, and these materials can be examined either cytologically or histopathologically or serologically or microscopically. For cytological examinations, we can observe for cytopathogenic or cytopathic effect in the cell. There may be morphological changes in the cells, or there may be presence of inclusion bodies, either nuclear inclusion bodies or cytoplasmic inclusion bodies. They may be observed using a microscope, a normal microscope. Tissue level examinations are done by the histopathological techniques for any pathological changes at the tissue level. The blood will be analyzed serologically for the presence of specific viral antigens. We can also use electron microscope for directly visualizing the viral particles in the tissue. So we can use animals for the cultivation of viruses. Even though this method have several advantages, we can cultivate viruses in a host-specific, tissue-specific manner, even though this method has its own disadvantages too. First disadvantage is that the animal possesses immunity, which may interfere with the viral growth. And there is a chance that even if we are using specific pathogen-free animals, they may harbor some latent viruses in their system. And the most important disadvantage is that it is very difficult to handle the animals and also to maintain them in a laboratory. Our next method of animal virus cultivation is the use of embryonated eggs. This technique was first used by Goodpasture and Burnett in 1931. Even though embryonated egg support most of the viruses, it does not support all animal viral growth. For the cultivation of viruses, the egg that we are going to use should be free from microbes. It should be collected from birds which are specific pathogen-free birds. The major advantage of embryonated eggs over the use of animals for viral cultivation are: the eggs are easily available, it is very economical, and is very convenient to handle. Generally, it will be relatively free from bacterial and mainly latent viral infections. And also, egg lack any immune mechanisms, so there is no immune mechanism interference in the growth of viruses. An embryonated egg is a fertilized egg 10 to 14 days after fertilization. It will have different types of differentiated tissues such as amnion, allantois, chorion, yolk sac, etc. We can inoculate the virus into these particular differentiated tissues. We can inoculate the virus either into the chorioallantoic membrane or into the amniotic cavity or into the yolk sac or into the allantoic cavity. The selection of the particular differentiated tissue depends upon the virus, since each virus grows well in specific areas or specific tissues inside the embryonated egg. To inoculate the embryonated egg, first the shell surface of the egg will be disinfected by using iodine or any other disinfectant, and it will be penetrated using a sterile drill. And through this drill hole, the virus will be inoculated, injected into the particular tissue area of our choice. And after inoculation, the drill hole will be sealed with gelatin, and then they will be incubated. Embryonated egg serves as a substrate for the growth of a wide variety of viruses such as orthomyxovirus, paramyxovirus, rhabdovirus, toga virus, herpes virus, pox virus, and many more. So, for the cultivation of pox virus and herpes simplex virus in an embryonated egg, our choice will be chorioallantoic membrane or CAM. The growth of a virus in a chorioallantoic membrane will result in visible lesions in the otherwise transparent chorioallantoic membrane, and these lesions are known as pokes. The number of poke will give the number of viruses, and so poke assay is a quantitation method for counting poke forming viruses. For example, for the counting of vaccinia virus, we can use poke assay. In the image, we can see pokes in a chorioallantoic membrane. The second tissue which could be inoculated in an embryonated egg is allantoic cavity, and allantoic cavity inoculation is used for the cultivation of influenza and some other paramyxoviruses. For the cultivation of influenza and mumps virus, we can use amniotic cavity inoculation, and yolk sac could be inoculated for growing herpes simplex virus. Yolk sac is also used for cultivating certain bacteria such as chlamydia and rickettsia. So after inoculating the embryonated egg with the virus to be cultivated, we should know whether the virus is growing or not. We can detect the presence of viral growth in embryonated egg by using different methods, and each method depends upon the virus that we are going to cultivate. If you are cultivating toga virus, then the viral growth will result in the death of the embryo. If you are cultivating infectious bronchitis virus, it will result in a deformity, which is the dwarf growth of the bird. If you are cultivating Newcastle disease virus, there will be hemorrhages inside the egg, and there will be edema or poke lesions on chorioallantoic membrane if we are cultivating cowpox virus or herpes virus. If we are cultivating herpes virus, we can also observe intracytoplasmic inclusion bodies inside the differentiated tissues of an embryonated egg. So, coming to the third method of animal viral cultivation, that is the use of tissue culture, animal tissue culture. This is the most widely used method for the cultivation of viruses, and it is used for the primary isolation of viruses, for performing infectivity assays, for biochemical studies on viruses, and it is also used for the production of viral vaccines. If we are producing viral vaccines by using tissue culture, we can minimize the hypersensitivity or allergic reactions towards the animal proteins, animal antigens or egg proteins. So for the production of viral vaccines, the most commonly used method is cultivation of viruses by using tissue culture. The advantages of using tissue culture for the cultivation of animal viruses are the growth can be detected easily, the viruses can be grown in a bulk quantity, and the host cells can be stored for longer periods of time. We cannot store an animal, a live animal, or an embryonated egg for a long period of time, but we can store tissue culture cells for longer periods of time at lower temperature. But the method also have certain disadvantages. They are, we require a good laboratory facility for maintaining a tissue culture. Therefore, it is more costly compared to the embryonated egg technique. And here also there is a chance for the presence of latent viruses in the cultured cells, in the tissue culture. There are three types of animal tissue cultures that we can use for the cultivation of viruses. They are organ culture, explant culture, and cell culture. In organ culture, small bits of organs are maintained in vitro under laboratory conditions in a proper nutrient media. And this technique is used for the isolation of certain viruses which are having high organ specificity. For example, tracheal ring organ culture is used for the cultivation of a respiratory pathogen, coronavirus. The second method of tissue culture is explant culture. In this, minced or small fragments of tissues are embedded in plasma clones, and it could be also inoculated with a virus. For example, adenode tissue explant culture is used for the cultivation of adenovirus. The third method of tissue culture is cell culture. This is the most routinely employed method for the identification and cultivation of viruses. There are three types of cell cultures based on the basis of origin of cells, the chromosomal characteristics of the cells, and the number of generations the cell culture could be maintained. So on the basis of these three parameters, there are three types of cell cultures. They are primary cell culture, diploid cell culture, and continuous cell culture. The first type of cell culture is primary cell culture. It is derived from normal cells obtained from the fresh organs of animals. Since these are normal cells, they have two specific characters. These cells are attachment dependent and also they have contact inhibition. The cells can grow only when attached onto a particular surface, and contact inhibition means the cells are not able to grow one over the other. They can grow only as a monolayer. So these cells will attach to the vessel surface, the vessel in which we are going to cultivate the cells. The cells will undergo mitosis and will form a conformed monolayer. These cells are capable of only limited growth. They cannot multiply for a longer period. Examples of primary cell culture are rhesus monkey kidney cell culture, human amnion cell culture, etc. The second type of cell culture is diploid cell culture. This is also known as semi-continuous cell lines. They come in between the primary cell culture and the continuous cell culture. They are semi-continuous cell lines. Generally, they are derived from a primary cell culture, but they are capable of growing to a longer period. They can undergo several times of replication. And these diploid cell cultures are therefore possible up to 50 times serial subcultures. After this time serial subcultures, they will undergo senescence. The cell strain will be lost. The diploid cell cultures retain their original chromosome characters, both in their number and in the appearance. The chromosome characters are normal, and this character will be retained during the subcultures also. But after 50-60 times of serial subcultures, the chromosome character will be changed and the cell strain will be lost. Since these are also normal cells, they are attachment dependent and also possess contact inhibition. Examples of diploid cell culture are human embryonic lung strain, rhesus embryo cell strain, etc. The third type of cell culture is continuous cell culture. This is also known as permanent cell line. These are generally derived from cancerous cells. They are not normal cells, they are cancerous cells, and therefore they are attachment or anchorage independent, and they do not possess any contact inhibition. Due to these factors, these cells are capable of growing as a suspension culture. They can grow in a faster rate, and their chromosomes are not normal. There will be alterations in the chromosomal characteristics. Generally, the chromosomes will be haploid. The continuous cell lines could be maintained for an infinite period of time, either by a serial subculture indefinitely, or they can be stored under -70°C for a longer period of time. Examples of continuous cell culture are HeLa cells, Vero cells, BHK cells, etc. HeLa cells are derived from the cervical cancer of a lady named Henrietta Lacks. And there is a book on the HeLa cells, their origin, maintenance, applications, etc. authored by Rebecca Skloot. Vero cells are obtained from monkey kidney. They are known as vervet monkey kidney cell line, and BHK cell lines are baby hamster kidney cell line. Now we will see the procedure for initiating a primary cell culture. First, we will obtain the tissue or organ which will be cut up into small fragments by mincing or chopping, and the fragments will be mixed with the enzyme trypsin. Trypsin is a proteolytic enzyme, and it will dissolve the connective tissue into separate individual cells. This process is known as trypsinization. So, both by an enzymatic mode and mechanical methods, we will obtain individual cells, separate cells from the tissue or organ, and now the cells could be cultivated in a suitable growth medium. The growth media contains essential amino acids, vitamins, salts, glucose, and a buffering system. And generally, the cell culture media will be supplemented with fetal calf or calf serum. The media will be added with antibiotics to prevent bacterial contaminants, and a pH indicator phenol red will also be added. So the media will have a pink color. The uninoculated sterile media will be pink in color. And on the growth of cells in the media, there will be acid formation. Metabolic acids will be formed, and therefore the media color will change to a lighter shade. So growth of cells in the cell culture media will result in a color change of the medium. So after adding the cells into the cell culture media, it will be incubated generally for 24 to 48 hours at 37°C in a carbon dioxide atmosphere. For providing carbon dioxide atmosphere, we will be using carbon dioxide incubator. During the incubation, the cells will attach onto the vessel surface and will divide to form a monolayer. Once the primary cell culture monolayer is ready, it could be inoculated with the virus and could be incubated at 37°C to obtain the virus culture. As we said, primary and secondary cell lines are anchorage dependent. They need to be attached onto a particular surface for undergoing cell division. So for their cultivation, we should provide a surface onto which they can attach. We may use surfaces of glass, plastics, natural polymers such as collagen, or any other support material. In a laboratory scale, the anchorage dependent cells could be cultivated by using tea flask, spinner bottles, roller bottles, or by using trays. We can see a tea flask in which the media will be filled and cells will be inoculated, and the cells will be growing as a monolayer at the bottom surface of the flask. In a spinner bottle also, there's a special type of bottle which will be placed over a spinner, and the cells here also will be growing as attached onto the interior surface of the bottle. Third type is roller bottles. The roller bottles are held in a perpendicular position, continuously rolled by using a roller. Here the cells will be growing in the inner side of the roller bottle, and we can also use trays in which the cells will be growing attached onto the bottom surface of the tray. So these are used for the cultivation of anchorage dependent cells in a laboratory scale. For the cultivation of anchorage dependent cells, primary or diploid cell lines, in a larger industrial scale, we may use roller bottles or microcarriers or hollow fiber reactors or immobilization based reactors. If you are using roller bottles, the bottles will be rotated in a large rotator and the cells will adhere onto the inner sides of the roller bottle. If you are using microcarriers of DEAE or dextran will be used. Here the cells will be growing on the surface of the microcarrier either as a monolayer or as multi-layers. For the cultivation of anchorage dependent cells, hollow fiber reactors can also be used. In this method, the cells will be immobilized on the external surfaces of the hollow fibers and they will grow there. And the nutrients will pass through the interior of the tube. The hollow fiber is having such a structure that the cells growing on the external surfaces of the fibers can absorb the nutrients which are passing through the interior of the tube. There are other immobilization based bioreactors also for the cultivation of industrial scale cultivation of anchorage dependent cells, and they are tubular ceramic matrix reactors, micro encapsulation or gel encapsulation based reactors. And the continuous cell lines or the cancerous cell lines are anchorage independent. They do not require a particular surface to attach for their multiplication. They can grow anchorage independently. Therefore, they are capable of growing as a suspension culture. So for their culture, we can use a stirred tank reactor or a bubble column reactor or a perfusion bioreactor. So we have discussed the methods of tissue culture. There are organ culture or expand culture or cell culture. The cell culture is again of three types: primary cell culture, diploid cell culture or continuous cell culture. Through these methods, we will obtain the host cells for viral cultivation. So once the host cells are available, we can inoculate the cell with the virus, and after incubation, we should be able to detect the virus growth. So there are several methods for the detection of virus growth in cell culture, and they are as follows. Cytopathic effect or cytopathogenic effect could be observed. We can observe metabolic inhibition or hemadsorption or interference, transformation or immunofluorescence. So the first technique of detection of virus growth in cell culture is by observing cytopathic or cytopathogenic effects. Cytopathic effects are morphological degenerative changes in cultured cells infected with a virus. This could be observed under a microscope. The common examples of cytopathic effects are rounding of the infected cells, fusion of the adjacent infected cells to form a syncytia, or the appearance of inclusion bodies, either nuclear or cytoplasmic inclusion bodies. So in the image we can see the rounding of cells due to the viral infection in a cell culture, monolayer. And we can also see the formation of syncytia, in which the virally infected cells will fuse together to form a giant cell. Examples of intracytoplasmic inclusion bodies are rabies virus will form Negri bodies, molluscum contagiosum virus will form molluscum bodies, and vaccinia virus will form Guarneri bodies. Examples of intranuclear inclusion bodies are acidophilic inclusion bodies by papovavirus, intranuclear basophilic bodies by adenovirus, and Cowdery type A bodies by herpes simplex virus or measles virus. The second method for the detection of virus growth in cell culture is by observing metabolic inhibition. As we said before, the growth of cells in a cell culture will result in the formation of metabolic acidic end products, which will change the color of the media from pink to yellow or to paler color. So if there is viral infection, the cells will not be able to grow, and therefore there will not be any acid formation. So no acid production indicates the presence and growth of virus in the cell culture. The third method for viral growth detection in cell culture is by observing hematsorption. This could be used to detect the growth of influenza and parainfluenza virus. This is performed by adding guinea pig erythrocytes to the culture, which will undergo hematsorption if there is viral growth. The fourth method of viral growth detection is by observing interference. There may be certain viruses which will not produce any cytopathogenic effect in a cell culture, and to detect the growth of such non-cytopathogenic virus can be detected by inoculating the cell culture by a second non-cytopathogenic virus, a virus whose cytopathogenic effects are already known. So if the growth of first virus is there, automatically the second virus could not be able to grow. The growth of the first virus will inhibit or interfere with the infection by the second virus. The fifth method of detection of virus growth is transformation. This could be used for identifying the growth of oncogenic viruses. Oncogenic viruses are capable of inducing transformation in the cells. Therefore, the normal characters of the cells will be lost. There will be loss of contact inhibition. So the cells will lose their normal monolayer architecture and they will form microtumors. So the appearance of microtumors indicates the presence of growth of oncogenic viruses in the cell culture. The sixth method for the detection of virus growth in cell culture is immunofluorescence, in which we can stain by using fluorescent molecules. The cells could be stained by fluorescent antibodies against viral antigens, and if we can observe viral antigens after staining, that means the cells are infected with the virus and the virus is growing. So these are the methods for the detection of virus growth in cell cultures. So we were discussing about viral cultivation. We discussed about bacterial viral cultivation, plant virus cultivation, and animal virus cultivation. These are the references. Thank you for listening to the session.